Wow. Who saw that coming? I'm not talking about Pharrell being appointed at Louis Vuitton. I'm talking about how everyone shared their thoughts on Pharrell at Louis Vuitton so fast. I wasn't even sure if I should make a video anymore. Fashion, man, it's brutal. In hindsight, Pharrell was definitely not a move that anybody saw coming for Louis Vuitton, but now, to me anyway, seems like a great move for them. I think it's going to be amazing for their business, but surprisingly, I've seen a lot of people have negative reactions towards this move. What's very important about all this that I think maybe some people don't understand is that Louis Vuitton is consistently one of the highest selling brands every year. In 2021, it was behind Gucci by $1 billion in profits. In 2022, it blasted by Gucci, earning a total of $23 billion, while Gucci only made $18 million that year. Yeah, Gucci didn't keep up. That's one reason why their creative director was fired. I already said it, but fashion, it's brutal. However, high profits does not make Louis Vuitton the most fashionable brand. That's more subjective. It's just the most successful brand. They prioritize market growth, not innovation or anything really pushing fashion forward artistically. Don't let the set design fool you. I had no idea who was going to be next for Louis Vuitton, and I'm not trying to be like I told you so, but I never saw it being Martine Rose or Grace Wells Bonner. They're relatively popular in fashion, but pretty unknown outside it. At the time that Virgil Abloh was being appointed, he had proven himself in being able to make millions and being a huge draw to anything that he touched. The United States and China are the largest markets in luxury fashion right now. They make up more than half of the luxury market compared to the rest of the world combined. And Virgil was the biggest designer you could hire to appeal to the American market, and Off-White had 16 stores in China already at the time. Neither Martine Rose or Grace Wells Bonner are that famous or have any stores anywhere. I know it's not a prerequisite for the role, but it would be a huge downgrade for Louis Vuitton, a company that, to reiterate, are primarily focused on growth. We're never going to hire down to a designer that doesn't have that star power, because Louis Vuitton have been riding Virgil's wave since his passing, while figuring out how to continue the brand in that direction. Rose and Bonner and most popular yet niche fashion designers don't have the star power or even a similar aesthetic to Virgil Abloh. And here's an opinion. I think that in men's fashion, celebrities are more important in moving product than in women's fashion. In marketing targeted towards women, they sell different ideas of the perfect woman and beauty, while in men's fashion, it's always be like George Clooney, smell like Robert Pattinson, stuff like that. There aren't many men's fashion archetypes to sell to, unless men know what they like when it comes to fashion. So they follow people who do seem like they have an idea about that stuff, like celebrities or popular designers like Virgil was. Mainstream men's fashion is a lot less about beauty than it is about status, unfortunately. Pharrell has that star power and so much more if you really know about him. I saw a lot of people complaining about the fact that Louis Vuitton hired a celebrity as their men's creative director, and I just explained why I think that's reasonable given their motivations. I'll get into Pharrell's qualifications in a second, but first, another point of misunderstanding that I saw was about the role of a creative director. In fashion, creative directors are not the same as designers, and I'd argue that creative directors often become famous anyway, even before in the 90s, but more than ever now. They become celebrities for the brands that they work for. When people talk about Balenciaga, they talk about Demna and what he's doing. A huge role of the creative director is being the representative of the brand, the backbone, the creative leader, and also the public relations person. They take the flack for a bad collection and praise for a good one. The creative director, especially at a huge brand like Louis Vuitton, doesn't sit down and draw looks or sew clothes, in the same way that CEOs don't sit down and do accounts for their business. They delegate. At smaller brands, creative directors have a lot more roles because they have to. They can't afford to delegate. Louis Vuitton has a huge team of trained designers. If you haven't noticed, the last couple of seasons have been designed without a creative director. And in my opinion, they've done a relatively good representing Virgil Abloh's vision. Creative directors, for the most part, make the difficult decisions about what the main ideas are going to be next season. They approve what goes in and what doesn't. And they decide who they want to collaborate with. And in the end, higher ups in these brands also kind of get a say in what happens. At huge brands, creative directors are essentially tastemakers. And you know who's one of the biggest tastemakers of the last couple of decades? This man right here. But he's way too controversial to represent such a non-confrontational company like Louis Vuitton. Maybe Mischief could hire him. That would be a crazy move. So who's the next best person who actually has a similar taste and aesthetic to Virgil Abloh? Pharrell Williams. I'm not saying I saw this coming, but it makes sense after the fact. For Louis Vuitton, I think it's a great choice to expand their menswear in the direction that Virgil was going. Now, Pharrell's qualifications as a creative director. I've seen a lot of people going back and looking at things he's designed specifically, which in my opinion isn't that important, but I guess adds credibility to the public. Yeah, he collabed with Louis Vuitton in the past on some sunglasses that sold well. He also had a popular NMD with Adidas. He designed some chairs for his house. Okay. But what about the fact that he built his own streetwear label with Nigo back in the early 2000s? That is one of the most successful of all time, Billionaire Boys Club. He's also a Chanel ambassador and has designed collections with them. Did he design it though, or did he just creatively direct it and, Chanel's team did all the designing? Look, as a creative director, I think he's qualified. He's never had a role this big before, but not many people have. Most people are going to be underqualified going into a job like this. Pharrell never went to fashion school, but he has credibility as a creative director through the brands he's worked with in the past. In the end, you don't go to fashion school to learn how to be a creative director. You go to be a designer. Something that maybe should be changed about fashion education, but that's a topic for another another time. Now let's really look at his star power and the potential that he has to bring to Louis Vuitton. Remember I said the US and China are two of the biggest markets right now for them? Well, Pharrell is a huge American celebrity over multiple generations, so he has that side covered. And I really can't think of any American designer that could have taken the role. Their only competitors are other luxury brands that do menswear like Gucci, but Tom Ford wasn't about to come back and go to Louis Vuitton. I also don't think Cullen Delane of Kitsuper would have been an appropriate permanent pick. They're not just hiring Pharrell. You know he's going to bring his connections, and he's way more connected than Virgil was. I'm sure 90% of people on the internet have come across the fact that Pharrell Williams and his producing partner Chad Hugo were responsible for producing 43% of the music that was on the radio in the US in 2003. He's been popular since the 90s. The man is definitely very well connected, and he can call upon any collab he wants to from very famous people that multiple generations will know. In regards to China and just Asia in general, because that's also a very big market, South Korea was actually the country with the highest spending on luxury goods per capita in 2022. Pharrell was the first male Chanel ambassador, Chanel being hugely popular in Asia. So he's definitely a recognizable name, if not already for his association with Bape. When Bape started getting big in the 90s and 2000s in the US, it was orchestrated through Pharrell meeting Nigo through a jeweler that they both frequented. Like, come on, everyone knows Pharrell and has a generally good perception of him. He's not in the news every week, but that's kind of a good thing. But ask anyone and they probably at least know him as the happy guy. He's got the star power, the draw, very decent credentials as a creative director. Again, he's not going to be on the design team drawing hundreds of sketches, doing loads of research, trying to find references. He'll be providing the vision. He's going to tell his team what he wants to do and the direction that he wants to go in. And he'll be stringing everything together as they go. I think he is very fit for the job for the tastemaker that he is. There are so many great Pharrell outfits and creative decisions that he's made. He's always been a bit ahead of the curve. Okay, look, maybe not in the case of the giant hats. If you're going to be a great tastemaker and ahead of the curve, you gotta experiment, okay? And no one always gets it right, but you gotta respect the experimentation. But let's get to why I think he has great potential to grow LV's profits even more. I think their menswear is already pretty maxed out, in all honesty. I don't think he's going to add a huge amount of customers or revenue through the clothing that he makes. However, if you know anything about LVMH and Bernard Arnault, the CEO of the parent company of Louis Vuitton, yes, he wants to grow the revenue even further, but he really just wants to make a true empire out of LVMH. And Louis Vuitton specifically is the brand he's most personally attached to. Either Louis Vuitton or Dior, if I had to make a guess. He already has all of his children working under him at huge brands that LVMH owns. He wants to develop Louis Vuitton into the ultimate lifestyle brand. That's what these brands have to do in order to keep growing. They can't just keep selling clothes, they have to expand their range of products. So they have more bullshit to make you think that you need to buy. That's what LVMH does. They are the biggest luxury group. They own fashion brands, watch brands, makeup brands, champagne brands, everything that can be considered luxury. They are the kings of charging crazy prices for things and getting away with it. So the way to grow is in other areas, and some weak points for Louis Vuitton specifically are their scents, makeup, and jewelry. Yeah, LVMH have other brands that do that stuff, like Dior Beauty or Bulgari, but again, this is about growing Louis Vuitton. And with Pharrell's appointment, we're specifically looking at how they can grow their men's items. Both of the brands that I mentioned focus on women, so there's a lot of growth to be had in men's items. So do you see why Pharrell can help a lot in those weaker areas? To an extent, he's a men's lifestyle celebrity as well as a musician, producer, and everything else that he does. Look how many views his skincare videos get on YouTube. Among everything, he's also known for his amazing skin and looking ageless. And the men's version of makeup is skincare. Pharrell has his own skincare line actually called Human Race that does relatively okay. Is Louis Vuitton gonna release skincare? Call me crazy, I guess we'll see. That one I'm not too sure about, but you get the point. He's known in part for his lifestyle. He wears a lot of jewelry and he looks like he smells good. Because he has an enviable lifestyle in that regard, he's the perfect guy to sell these things. It's literally a celebrity endorsement, but it's even better because Pharrell himself is making this stuff backed by Louis Vuitton, the biggest luxury fashion house in the world. The clothing has already been established by Virgil. They're still following what he set out to do. And I'm sure Pharrell will tweak it and make it a bit more exciting, but I can't see it changing drastically. Personally, I think that Pharrell is going to be Louis Vuitton's way of growing their other men's product ranges, as well as bringing new life to the runways. They need a new creative director to back them and make it more exciting again. I predict that if he does well, because he could just mess it up, I think during his time, LV will emphasize their jewelry and cologne a lot more. Potentially, this one's a bit of a stretch, but do something skincare related. Even just as a test, like they did that Supreme Louis Vuitton collab back in the day. They'll do that, but for skincare. And in the end, their revenue from men's products will probably rise. And if Pharrell does do well, we might see more celebrities getting roles at these brands, especially LVMH brands. Because as I said, they are the biggest brands in the world that are doing well. They don't need to take risks by hiring untested designers. When Balenciaga hired Demna, they weren't doing that well when Alexander Wang left after only 3 or 4 seasons. I don't remember. They needed to change up the brand and be revitalized. Same goes for Bottega Veneta when they hired Daniel Lee. Brands that are underperforming take these risks, hiring unknown or just more experimental designers that haven't worked at these huge brands before. LVMH brands aren't looking for that. They're looking to grow even further. For the most part, they don't really take risks. The biggest risk LV took in recent years was collabing with Supreme, which was a pretty calculated low-risk move to test the potential of a pivot into a new market for them, luxury streetwear. And it worked. That's why they went on with Virgil, because they knew that it would do very well. And now I think the next step is to expand their product range, because I think the aesthetic of the clothes that they produce are going to be relatively unchanged. If you really love fashion for the art that it can be, the big brands aren't the ones that are innovating. They're not the ones you should really care that much about, in my opinion, of course. Do whatever you like. If you like them, that's totally fine. But objectively, I don't think it's that experimental or exciting, which is what I personally like to see in fashion. I only pay attention to some big brands like Louis Vuitton, because what they do have a huge impact on the culture and fashion industry at large, regardless of if I think they should have or not. So those are my thoughts. I don't think much will change overall, really. I wonder if Pharrell, as a creative director, can even tell the difference between fabrics and fibers. If he wanted to, though, this week's Patreon video would help him out. It's a very comprehensive guide to fabrics and fibers. More than just telling you what's good and bad, but an overview of all that goes into fabrics and what you need to know, so that you don't have to go searching across multiple sources to find out. I found the best info and put it into one video. Anyway, feel free to share your thoughts. This was all just my opinion, of course. I might be wrong. I might be completely wrong. I'd love to hear your opinions as well as to what you think might happen, or the motivations behind this choice. Anyway, here's my a cappella rendition of Happy by Pharrell Williams that transitions into Are You Happy by Bo Burnham.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man.